Well, joining me once again at rockposer.com is a gentleman behind a fantastic American band, the band being American Mafia. The gentleman in question, Mr. Freddy Villano. Welcome back to rockposer.com.
Thanks for having me, Dan. I appreciate it, and the guys in the band appreciate it, and we really are, humbled by your unavailing support of the band, and so we really, got a lot of mileage out of you wearing that T-shirt at Fiberfest. So we're the ones that are really grateful for your support.
Well, it's all your fault because you keep producing great music.
We just can't help ourselves.
It's a burden you have to bear, I know.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to shoulder that responsibility. So it might as well be us.
Well, obviously, what we're going to talk about is something which first reared its head, I won't say ugly head, but its head about a year ago now when it was first announced. Of course, that is the Made in New York EP, which went through the whole Pledge Music thing. Is out for you, the general public, to go and purchase with your hard-earned shekels, and I strongly recommend that you do. I guess, once again, it's a bit of a labour of love for you guys.
It sort of has to be in this day and age, because there's not a lot of money in the business for bands like us. I mean, maybe there is. I mean, I don't mean to sound jaded, but
no.
Despite the fact that a lot of us have individual track records and experience with known bands, American Mafia is a fairly unknown entity, and as such, we kind of have to work our way up through the ranks, So, that's number one. Number two, it has to start that way. I mean, I think that hopefully the authenticity that people perceive in the music comes from the fact that we really love what we're doing. We're not just doing it to be famous. We're doing it because this is who we are. We're musicians that would be making this music despite fame or not. So and the proof is in the pudding, I guess, because we're not famous per se, but we're still trying to put out quality music because that's who we are.
Well, even going against sort of most people's perceptions, it is really, really difficult to get your name out into the public eye. Even though people think, with the likes of Facebook and other social media, it must be really easy. Not the way things are skewed, especially when it comes to Facebook and the way that they set up their little software gremlins in the background to basically hide anything unless you pay a lot of money. So I guess it's down to people like myself, etc., to get the word out there to people, which I'm more than happy to do on a regular occasion, let's face it, because this is, and I've said it before and I'll say it a million times, just good, honest American hard rock.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's true. I mean, without you, people like you, Dan, who knows where we'd be? I mean, I don't know how to quantify the amount of assistance we get in terms of exposure from Rockposer and sites like that, but there might be a way to do that. But if we had to do it all on our own, it would be very, very difficult. And that's the whole catch-22 about the business nowadays, is that people. Yeah, everybody can make a record and have access to marketing themselves in a way that wasn't possible 20 years ago. But at the same time, there's so much more stuff for people to filter through to try to find you. So the question that always presents itself when we're doing something like this is do we need to create just like some crazy video that might go viral, or how do we help spread the word or get the word out about the band and the project or the album? And fortunately, we've found our way into the hands of people like you who like what we do and are able to help spread the word. So it's been we've been fortunate in that regard, I would say. And I feel like on that level, the project is already successful. So.
Well, I guess there's no real magic bullet to get yourself noticed. I guess with more and more stuff, the attention span of everybody, myself included, tends to drop quicker and quicker. And if something doesn't grab you within that first 5-10 seconds, then that moment's gone, so to speak.
It's funny, you know, when we did the last record, Hit Machine, Rock and Roll Hit Machine, the first video that we did from that record was Friendly Fire.
Mm.
And Don Chaffin, who sings on that song and also sings on the new EP, he owns a video production company. So we did the video with his company. And, he brought it up. We questioned whether or not to cut the song down because it's a 6-minute song. And it's like, are we really going to put out a video for a 6-minute song? And I was the one at the end that really was adamant about keeping the integrity of the song together and shoving that down people's throats, because for me, again, it goes back to being who we are and being honest about that and not trying to filter it in any way to make it more palatable for people that can't sit through a 6-minute song, you know? So for me, it's kind of like, this is who we are. You don't have to like it. You can move on to something else. But I want to reach out to the people, you know, who really want to experience something that maybe offers something a little deeper, you know, than just a 2-minute soundbite or whatever a song may be these days.
I guess it appeals to me because, and it's something which I bore everybody crazy saying continuously, is there are too many bands these days that just sound exactly the same, and you'll never know which is which unless you actually bother to look on your media player or what have you to remind yourself who you're actually listening to. I think there certainly is a trend now where bands are tending to go back to certainly the sound that you guys have got, which is, you know, what I call, you know, the bread and butter hard rock sound. There seems to be more bands are sort of branching away from certain labels, etc., and just saying, no, do you know what? We're not playing that game. Look, if people like it, to do it. If they don't, they don't. But hell, at least we've got the integrity at the end of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it would be weird for us to come out and try to sound like, you know, Stained or Disturbed or something like that, you know. And it's funny that you say that, because I had to do a gig recently and play some songs by a couple of those bands, and it was a revelation to differentiate them, because I never knew who was who, you know, from like this modern rock era. They you know, and I don't mean that in I don't mean to like degrade those bands in any ways. I just think there's a production quality that happens that sort of makes everybody sound the same. You know, even if the bands as individuals probably start out sounding very different, there's this sort of production quality going on now that is pretty universal and uniform, that kind of really, you know, makes everything sterile, in my opinion. With American Mafia, again, it would be weird for us to do that. I mean, it's not where we come from. Our roots are 70s rock bands, and you know, I think we're probably even a little bit derivative in some ways, but hopefully we, you know, get by, you know, by being, I mean, I hear the influences, you know, and I know other people hear the influences because they mention them in the reviews, but they don't seem to be so derivative that we are, you know, pegged as ripping anybody off. You know, it just really seems like the influences are getting channeled through the proper lens, you know, of our own experience, which is, you know, our own experience and our own fingers and whatnot, and coming out the other end in a way that sounds somewhat original, you know. So, again, I think I don't have a magic formula. We just do what we do, and it seems to work on some level that people appreciate.
Well, the only complaint I've got about Made in New York is the fact it's only 5 tracks.
I know. You know, it's funny, when we started, I was like, let's just do an EP. Well, because we wanted to get something out quick, because it had already been like a year since Rock and Roll Hit Machine was out, and we knew we weren't going to tour to support that record because, you know, we had all these different singers on it and stuff, and it still took 2 years to do the EP. So I don't know, my plan kind of backfired, because it was supposed to be done a lot quicker than it actually ended up taking. But we are working on, we have about 6 songs. I mean, I have a whole record's worth of other material, but there's about 6 songs that are somewhat started for a new record. So I'm hoping that we can get something out in a much quicker time period to just keep the name out there while we're in this phase of really not having the infrastructure to tour, do many live gigs or anything like that. So that our angle at the moment is to just try to keep the name out there with a constant barrage of material, and albums. And as long as there's somebody willing to put it out, we'll keep popping them out.
So, talking about the next release, are you going to go down the route of the EP and have just Don singing it, or are you going to go for the multiple vocalists again, like the first release?
We've been tinkering with the multiple vocalist idea. That was capturing lightning in a bottle, and I don't know if it will work again. I mean, that worked so seamlessly. I do feel like we got a little bit lucky, but there's, some of those guys want to work with us again. As a matter of fact, one of the first songs we wrote for this next record, we wrote with Jimmy Coons, who sings Every Time and Man on the Flying Trapeze from Rock and Roll Hit Machine. So we wrote a new song with him called Snake Oil and Gypsy Tears, and that's kind of what launched the third record into action. And, so it got me thinking again, that, while we're in this state of really being a recording entity and not a live entity yet, that, there's just a lot of great artists out there that I would personally like to work with, and I know Tom would. And, so as long as the fulcrum of the band, remains pretty much me and Tom, I think that he and I have a sound and a writing style that we can, mix and match, just based on, whatever our mood is in that particular moment. He had a riff that he really felt Jimmy Coons would be ideal for, so we went in that direction. We have we'd like to work with John West again.
Yeah.
I have an open mind about it. When we went into Hit Machine and we knew we were going to use different singers, we had a pretty big list of people that we wanted to work with, and some weren't available. And so, it would kind of be nice to circle back around to that and work with some of the people who are available and are interested now, and are interested because they have seen the fruits of our labors, and that has piqued their interest. So maybe they weren't sure at first,
Of course.
And having heard Rock and Roll Hit Machine, they're now kind of on board with doing something with us. And there's a singer from back in the day that Tom and I worked with on and off for a long time. His name is Neil Thomas. He was in a band in the tri-state area called White Tiger.
I'm familiar with the name.
Yeah, he played in a band called Slam Nation with Dave the Beast Spitz and Chet Thompson out in L.A. Great singer, great frontman and stuff. So he's somebody we'd like to work with, that we've been in touch with, So there's multiple irons in the fire. We're kind of keeping them all stoked right now and just kind of chipping away at new material. And we'll probably, I'm moving into a house, so the rest of my year is kind of consumed by doing that and moving out of the apartment that I've been living in for a while with me and my wife. So after the new year, we'll probably get into the studio up here. And I live in central New York, in Ithaca, New York now. Tom still lives on Long Island, but I have a studio. There'll be a studio in my house, but I have another studio or two that I work at up here. So after the new year, we'll get in and start chipping away at some basic tracks and start, building it out.
Great
just
stuff.
See where it goes. I try not to have too many expectations, because it always, things, you have an idea of what you want something to be, and then when you start doing it, circumstances change, and things happen that make it go in a different direction. And you can either be bummed out about that, or you just roll with it and continue on. And I've learned through experience that it's better to just have an open mind and really kind of accept the challenges and the changes that come along and just move forward. So I have an open mind about what, just a long way of saying, it's
see
kind
which
of a
way
blank
see which way it takes you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a blank canvas right now. The riffs are there, some of the grooves are there and stuff. Who sings what? It's all up for grabs at the moment. So.
Well, speaking of of working with people,
Yep.
Obviously the release, I believe it's out now, is obviously the work that you've done with none other than Ronnie James Dio's cousin, of course, David Feinstein, and his tribute to Ronnie, Hail and Farewell. How did you get involved in that project?
Well, I know because I live in the area now where Rock Feinstein lives. I became friends with him through a drummer friend of mine by the name of Nate Horton. We play in a band together here called 10 Man Push with John West too.
Right.
And Nate has played on a few of Rock's solo albums. John West sang on a Feinstein record. So I kind of just got into that whole circle. And Nate and I were originally going to do this record. And then it, I think, briefly almost turned into like a Rods record. And then it didn't become a Rods record. It went back to being a Feinstein record because Dave felt it musically didn't fit the Rods model, you know, because he wanted to have keyboards on it. He wanted to have his daughter sing on it. So
right.
there was this additional musical component to it that took it out of the realm of the Rods repertoire. And so, you know, we ended up doing a benefit for Nate's dad last summer. And Rock and Nate and I played a couple of songs together, and he was starting to get, you know, into the record. And I said, hey, if you need anybody to play bass, you know, on the record, let me know. And that was basically it. You know, we just started doing it. He worked pretty extensively with Lonnie Park, who is also another member of 10 Man Push, singer and keyboard player, who has worked, you know, together with John West for the past 20 years or so. And so Lonnie and Rock really, you know, worked together on producing the record. Carl Kennedy played drums on most of it. Nate played drums on a song or two. I played bass on the whole thing. There's a couple of guest singers. And it was an amazing experience, you know, because, I mean, I have to say, growing up, you know, outside of a bass player like Geezer Butler or Steve Harris, Ronnie James Dio was undoubtedly my biggest influence. When I was a kid, you know, I played drums first and was into Kiss, like most kids are, probably because of the, you know, imagery.
Yeah.
And one of my sisters was dating a guy, you know, they were teenagers and I was still probably preteen, like about 12 years old. He saw that I liked Kiss and he came over one day with Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath. And he was like, here, check this out. And so, you know, that was my introduction to Black Sabbath was through Dio, you know, first. And then like a week later, I wanted to play bass. You know, I was just blown away with the bass playing on the record. You know, so it was, you know, and oddly enough, that same guy took me to my first concert ever when I was a kid, and it was Iron Maiden on the Number of the Beast tour at the North Stage Theater on Long Island in a town called Glen Cove. And the opening band was the Rods. So in a seriously weird twist of fate, like coming full circle kind of thing, the first band that I ever saw live, like in a real concert, you know, not like a club band, but in a real concert was the Rods. And here I was last year sitting in a room, you know, playing on a record with Rock Feinstein and Carl Kennedy, like kind of pinching myself going, wow. You know, had somebody said, you know, back in 1982, someday you're going to be doing a record with these guys, I never would have believed it, you know, so.
But life has these funny twists, doesn't it? I mean, it just, you know, that these funny avenues that we find ourselves travelling down. And, it's great when it happens, it has to be said. I bet you were just almost like a kid in a candy store.
Oh, absolutely. I was so honored to be involved in that project, and I'm very proud of it. I think, you know, Rock and Lonnie did a great job, and you know, I hope that it gets a wider, you know, right now Rock has, you know, released it on his own through CD Baby, and he's, you know, I think there's a, you know, he made up some hard copies and stuff, but, you know, maybe there's a chance a label will pick it up, and I know he has some thoughts about hopefully doing some gigs maybe at some point, you know, in honor of his cousin, and, you know, that would all be great, you know, if that happens. You know, it was a wonderful project to be a part of. You know, and I can't say enough about those guys. I mean, working with them in the studio, you know, Lonnie is one of the most positive, reinforcing producers that I've ever worked with. He just makes you feel like you're capable of doing anything in the studio. You know, so he's helping me work on a record of my own now with. It's not really a heavy metal record. It's kind of like I write these bass-oriented songs that have a real funk kind of slant to them.
Right.
And I work with this woman. Her name is Danielle Gore. She lives out in Las Vegas, but we've written songs on and off together since the late '90s. So we're finally putting a record together. And she came out to Ithaca from Las Vegas, and we worked in the studio with Lonnie. And just his way of producing her and working with her and working with me on the Feinstein record, I just have really come to appreciate his producing style.
Well, I guess being a New York boy and playing bass, I guess there's going to be an element of funk going to come in there somewhere.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, you know. It didn't come to me until later on when I was living in Los Angeles. I got a gig playing in actually, you know what? It actually started in New York. There was a band for a while in Los Angeles that was popular in the '90s. Made up mostly of Jeff Scott Soto was in it for a while. It was a disco cover band called the Boogie Nights, and they had all these offshoot bands. And they finally came to New York, and I ended up in one of the offshoot bands called Booty Fever or something like that. And then I moved back to LA, and I got a gig with one of their bands on weekends in Las Vegas. And it was the first time I really dawned on me. I'm a late bloomer, I guess, maybe in this way, but it really dawned on me that, wow, the bass could be the main instrument in the music, and the guitar is kind of like the rhythmic instrument.
Yeah.
And so I started writing a lot of songs that kind of had that real bass-driven kind of vibe to it. And Danielle was one of the first people I started working with on that material, and she really encouraged me to pursue writing in that way. So it was really sort of fundamentally like the first time that I wasn't being a bass player following a rock guitar riff. You know, it was really founded on the riffs that I was coming up with, and they were funky. You know, so we're kind of getting around to like material that we've been chipping away at for a very long time, and putting a record of that material together. So it'll be interesting for me to try to put that out, because I don't really know anybody in that field to shop a record to. So I'm going to have to hit up some of my other friends who may know some people, because it's not going to, can't go to it's not going to be a record that Lion's Pride is going to put out.
No. I mean, I've got to say, I've got a bit of a soft spot for Chic and the material that they brought out. I guess that's sort of
brilliant.
My sort of first introduction, sort of what I call that New York bass, sort of vibe and sound. And I really love it. I went out and bought Freak the Chic, the 7-inch single as a kid.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I probably hated it as a kid because it was my duty to not like it, you know. I mean, I probably even bordered on not liking Led Zeppelin, because everything was like, you either like Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin. You either like Ozzy or Ronnie James Dio, you know.
Yeah.
But then you get older and you get out of that, tunnel vision, and you realize that, I mean, even with 10 Man Bush, the band that I play with Nate and John and Lonnie, we do a lot of covers and we do a lot of modern country stuff because that's what's popular up here. And
right.
It's not something I would have typically gravitated towards on my own, but My Kind of Party by Jason Aldean has a great bass line in it. I love playing that song. So there's value in everything if you have an open mind about it. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got, as people know me too well, I've got quite an eclectic taste in music, and I tend not to try and sort of batten the hatches down on a particular genre too much, because I can go into some weird and wonderful stuff which other people go, you like that? Well, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Well, Freddie, it's been absolute joy and treat to have you back on rockposer.com. Already looking forward to the next release, and I'm going to be nagging you and Tom like hell over the next 6 to 8 months about it.
Please do keep us on our toes.
Oh, trust me, I'll be cracking the whip, just even if it's purely on the selfish front for my part.
No worries. Well, we appreciate the support as always, and we're really grateful to be within your good graces and have all the attention that we get at rockposer.com. It really is humbling and appreciated. So thank you for that.
Thanks very much, Freddie. You take care, and I'll speak to you soon.
All right, Dan. Take care.